Alright guys, so now we are going to be using a TypeScript with React.js. So if you guys don't know what a TypeScript is, I have a complete course on there right here. So this is going to be like more than a crazy course. Like if you care about learning TypeScript, this is going to be the last course for you to learn. Okay, so yeah, learn there and then come back to this video. And now we are going to be learning about TypeScript with React.js. So to do that, first of all, we have to make a setup. So I'm going to open my terminal right here. And now I'm going to be using npm create read at latest. Now if I hit enter, now we have to give it some sort of a name like ts demos or something like that. In this case, I'm going to be choosing React.js and also TypeScript. We are not going to be choosing JavaScript. We're going to be choosing TypeScript. So if I just hit enter, now we have to go into this ts demos. And now if I hit enter, and now I'm going to be using a code dot to open there right here. Next, let me open my terminal, and I'm going to be using npm I to install all of the dependencies. And all of their dependencies are now successfully installed. So here you can see we have our src folder, and now inside this src folder, we are now using tsx extension right here. You can either use ts or you can also use tsx instead of a jsx. Now we are working with TypeScript, so for that we have to use a tsx. So I can just clean up every single thing we don't need there. So I'll just remove all of that. And let's just say bye to this one, and I guess that's going to be fine, but I'm going to have to remove this index.css file from there. We have to go into the app, and I'm going to just remove every single thing from here, and let's just use our rafce, and that's going to be fine. I'm going to also remove this public folder because we also don't need that. And now if I save my file and open that inside my browser by using npm run dev, and here you can see we are now getting our app. So the setup is now totally done. Next, we are going to be learning about component props in action. So to do that, first of all, we are going to be creating a component. So I'll just create a components folder, and inside this folder, I'm going to create like user.tsx. We are now working with TypeScript, so we have to specify tsx as extension. And now inside that, we are going to be using our rafce to create our component right here. Save my file. Now I'm going to go into my app component. And now I'll just remove this app, and instead of that app, I'm going to just replace that with this user. We're going to be importing that totally directly, and now if I save my file, and we are now getting our user right here, which is amazing. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to pass a few props to it. So I'll just use like name, and name can be anything like Alex or Hussein or something like that. I'm going to also specify the age of 20 to him, and also the is student. Is he a student or not? So I'll just specify true value, and as soon as I do that, I'm now getting this error right here. So if I hover my mouse over to there, it is now telling me that the type this prop which you are specifying right here is not assignable to the type intrinsic attribute. Okay, like you have to do something about that. Like you're providing these props, but you're not using them inside this component. And to use them, you already know how we are going to be using them. So we can just use like props right here. And now we can totally use that right here inside our component. So I'll just use like, I don't know, maybe h2. And we're going to be using like props.name. First of all, let me just duplicate that a few times. Props.age and also is student right here. So if I save my file, and as you can see, we are now getting Alex and also 20. And we cannot see the is student because this is a Boolean value. And now here, if I hover my mouse over to there, it is giving me an error like perimeter props implicitly has any type, like which simply means you are not using any TypeScript. So if you want to use TypeScript, you got to do something about that. So I want to use TypeScript. So for that, I'm going to have to specify a type for the name, for the age, and also for the is student. And why is that? Because we are now passing this data and we are not providing any type for that. So to provide a type for that, we are going to be annotating our prop like this. Okay, so I'll just first of all take care of the name, and name is a string value which I already know because we're now specifying a string value. And now we know that we also have an age, and age is a number, and also we have a is student property which is a Boolean. Okay, so as soon as I provide that and save my file, here you can see we are no longer getting that error. And why is that? Because we are now explicitly telling our compiler that the name should be a string, the age should be, come on, let me just get there, age should be a number, and also the is student should be a Boolean value. So that's why our TypeScript compiler now know which type to use. So now if I save my file and just refresh them, we are still getting that same result, and we are not getting any errors inside our VS Code. Now that's the first way, but in some situation we would also want to destructure our values from these props. So how are we going to be doing that? Well, we already provided a type for that. we just have to destructure all of that value. So I'll just remove these props and I'll just replace them with these curly braces. You want to destructure the name, the age, and also the is student right here. So as soon as I do that, here you can see I'm now getting like cannot find name of prop, like we are not using a prop, so that's why we are getting this error. So I'm gonna select that first one, hit Control D and remove that. So as soon as I just remove that, save my file, this is how my formatting will look like. I know it seems a bit crazy, but yeah, this is how we are going to be destructuring our data, and this is how we are going to be providing a types for our data. So I want you to keep that in mind. So this is just a basic way of providing our prop. Now let me show you how we are going to be extracting all of their types into either a separate shape or a separate type. Okay, so I'll just cut that from here, and I'm going to also remove that from here. And once again, we are getting all of that errors right here. So to do that, we can either create a type. You already know how to create a type if you are coming from my TypeScript course, but if you don't know how to create a type, you should go ahead and watch my TypeScript course. Now I'll just create my type, and I'm going to give it the name of like user shape. You can basically give it any name that you like, and now inside there we are going to be just passing our types right here. So we are now creating our user shape, but now we have to tell our component that we want to use this user shape. So I'm going to copy that from here, and I'm going to just annotate my component props to this user shape. So as soon as I do that, I'm going to save my file and refresh that, and still we are getting that same result, and that errors are now successfully gone. So that's the first way. Now I can totally comment this line out, and we can also create an interface for this. So I'll just use like interface, and I'm going to give it the name of like user shape one more time, and we're not going to be using any equals to sign because we are now working with the interface. And now inside there we can use like name will be a string and age will be a number, and also we have the property of is student. Come on, is student, and that's going to be the boolean value. So as soon as I do that, save my file, and here you can see we are getting the same result, and we are no longer getting their error messages right here. This is how we are going to be working with the prompts with the component. But now in some situation we will also want to use the children. So now let me just remove that from here. I'm gonna call my component as this way. So we want to pass some sort of a JSX inside there. I'm not gonna do anything crazy, but I'll just put a paragraph which will just say like hello, which means like we want to use our children right here. So to use them, for that we are going to be using our children. So we have to destructure our children right here. Come on, children. I'm gonna copy that, and we have to replace that with this h1 or maybe h2, and we have to render our children right here. So if I save my file, still we are getting this error right here because this children has no property and it is not available inside this user shape. So I'm going to remove that from here, and I can just write like children. And now what will be the type of this children? Like this is not a prop, this is neither a string nor a number or boolean or undefined or anything like this. So what in the world we are going to be specifying for this children? So we are going to be using something called the React node. Okay, so if I just use like React node, and if I hit enter, so it's going to auto import there right here, as you can see. So if I save my file, here you can see we are not getting any errors, and here you can see we are getting our hello. But now I want to see like what is inside this React node. So if I hold my control or command, and if I click on that, so it's going to brings us to, you guessed it, index.d.ts, which means like it's gonna brings us to types file. Like this file only includes the types, nothing else than there. So this React node can either be a React element, either a string, number, iterable, portal, boolean, null, undefined, and there are a lot of things that you can explore in this file, but I will never recommend you to like explore this file. There are a lot of things going on right here. Okay, so I'll just remove that from here. And this is how we are going to be specifying our React node for our children. Now this is the modern way of providing our shape for our prop, but there is also another way you will find like in the documentation or somebody else code. So I also want to show you there, so which is called the FC or functional component. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove that from here, and I'm going to go back to my old prop. Like we have the name, age, and also the student. I'm going to save that file. I'm going to also remove that from here. We also don't need these children, so let's just remove that and also remove this. Okay, so we only have this user shape, and I'm going to uncomment there right now, save my file. Now I'm going to also destructure my name, age, and also the student property right here. And now let me show you the older way of providing a prop for our TypeScript. So this is how we are going to be doing there. First of all, we have to provide our colon, then we have to write a FC, which will be coming from the React.js. As you can see right here, FC, like a functional component, is coming from the React.js. And now we have to write like less than sign, and here we have to specify like a user shape, and we have to close there. And once you close there, and if I hover my mouse over to there, it is saying like all destructure element are unused, like you are not using them inside your code. And now to fix this problem, we are going to be using this. So I'll just use like h1. I'll write my name and then age, and then finally is student property right here. So if I save there, and here you can see this is yet another way of providing a prop to our component. Welcome to the React TypeScript first challenge. So in this one, I want you to create the button component, which will take three prop like label, on click, and disable. So label will be just the label for our button, and the on click will be a function which will be executed whenever somebody clicks on our button. And also the disable will be a state, like we can indicate either the true or false, and it's gonna make our button either disable or enable. So then finally you have to import that component inside the app.tsx file and just run there and make sure that you didn't get any errors. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution, and now I'm going to give you my solution. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my component, and inside this component I'll just create my button.tsx in this case, because we are now working with TypeScript, so we're going to have to create this tsx. Now I'll just write my rafc, save my file, go to my app and register that component right here. So I'll just write my button and close there like so. As I mentioned, it's going to take three prompts, so I'll just write a label, and the label will be set to click. So I'll just write a click right here, and also the on click event handler. In this case, we're going to be passing our arrow function, and I'll just say like console.log and click like so. And I'm going to also pass the disable state, so disabled, and for the disable state I'm going to set that to false. Now that we successfully provided our prop, we have to get that prop inside our component. So how can you go about doing that? And this is how we are going to be consuming or accessing that props. I'll use the prop, and here we also have to define a type for there. So I'll just use like label. For the label, that's going to be a string. We are going to be also passing the on click event handler, and that's going to be a function, so we have to just provide a void right here, because we are not going to be returning anything from there. And also the disable state, and for the disable, that's going to be a boolean value, so we also have to annotate there. Now we have to use the inside our UI, so I'll just remove this button and replace that with this button, actual button right here. And here we are going to be passing like prop.label, and also we have to provide the on click event handler, and for the on click event handler we are going to be using like on click like so. We are going to be also passing the disable, okay, and that's going to be equals to that prop.disable. So I'm going to save my file, open my terminal, and use npm run dev. So it's going to run there inside my browser. So that's cool and everything, like we are getting our button, we're not getting any errors right here, but we can also refactor this code to use a destructuring. So I'll just remove these props, and I'm going to write like label and on click event handler, and also the disable state. We no longer have to provide these props and dots. I'll just select one and hit Ctrl D and remove them. Now let me just save my file, and this is how my code looks like. And yeah, we can click on our button, and it's going to give us like something inside our console, as you can see. Welcome to the reusable prop typing with React.js and TypeScript challenge. So the first thing that I want you to do is that I want you to create a file with the name of types.ts inside the src directory. Then define the info type and extend the admin info list inside the types.ts file. So what is the info type? This type represents the base information shared by all users. It includes essential properties like ID, name, and email about a specific user. And yeah, that's going to be the first portion of this challenge. And in the next portion, you're going to have to create a component with the name of user info, and that component will display the user information based on the info type. Then create an admin info component, and that will display the user information and additional admin detail based on the admin info list type. Okay, and finally you have to import all of them inside the app.tsx file and just see like if you got some sort of error or not. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. And now let me just give you my solution. So I'm going to remove that and create first of all my component user info.tsx and also admin info.tsx. So I'll just create like rafc inside this one, and also the rafc inside the admin info component. Now let me go ahead and go to my app and register both of that component right here. So I'll use like user info and grab there. I'm going to also use the admin info, and also grab there right here. Now let me create some sort of a data. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my user, and that user will have the ID, and that's going to be set to like 1, and also have the name, which will be like, I don't know, John Doe, and also the email will be set to john@gmail.com. So that's going to be just for a normal user. We're going to be also creating one for the admin, and the admin will have the ID of 2, and also the name will be set to Jenny Smith or something. And also we're going to be providing an email, and that's going to be set to jenny@gmail.com. Okay, and now we are going to be providing a role, and the role will be set to admin. Come on, admin, like so. And we are going to be also providing the last login. So I'll just use like new date, and it's going to give us the last login. Now here you can see we've defined our data, and now we are going to be passing that data, but we also have to create a type for this data. So how can you go about doing that? I'm going to show you how we can do that, but now let me just pass this data as a prop. So I'll just write like user and user, and I'm going to also specify the admin, and which will be set to this admin data. Okay, so now let me go ahead and create my types right here inside this src folder. So I'll just create like type or types.ts, and here we're going to be defining our types. Like, let me just show you all of that, like so. The ID is now set to 1. So first of all, I'm going to just define like type of info, and this going to be a type. So the ID is now set to number, so we are going to be providing a number. And also, come on, I forgot to include the equal to sign. I thought I was just creating some sort of object. Anyway, so the name is set to string. Also the email is set to string. Okay, now underneath there we are going to be also defining another type, which will be the admin info list type, and that's going to be coming from the info. Like, we want every single thing that the info have, and we also want to attach this new one. So for the role, here you can see we already get all of their data or all of their types from this info, and now you want to attach the role and also the last login. A role will be set to string, and the last login will be set to date. Okay, and finally we have to export this so that we can use that inside our file. So I'll just export there, but we have to explicitly tell it like this is a type. So I'll just use like info and type of admin list info right here. Okay, so now that we successfully created there, we also exported there, but now we have to use them inside our file. Okay, so to use them, I'm gonna grab first of all my info and also the admin list or admin info list to be precise. And we also have to annotate this list or this user with our type. So I'll just use like info, and I'm gonna also provide my admin right here. So I'll use like admin list or admin info list right here. Okay, so now that's totally done. Now let me just go ahead and go to my component and grab all of their data. Let me just zoom in a bit, and the first thing that I want to do is that I want to grab my info from my types file, and here we're going to be defining our own type. So I'll just use like type user info prop will be fine, and that's going to be equal to the user, and for the user we are going to be defining all of their type. So I'll just use like the older way of providing a prop. So I'll use like React. Let me just get there, and I'm going to use like FC for functional component, and here we're going to be providing our user info prop, and I'm going to close that. I'm going to also destructure the user, like all of the data which we are now providing for this user, and we have to render them inside this component. So I'll use like h2, which will say like user info or information would be fine, and underneath that we're going to be creating our ID, which will just give us like user.id, and I'm going to duplicate that a few times. So we have a name, and we also have the email address. So I'm going to just change this value to like name, and also change this ID to email, and that's going to be fine. We'll be doing exactly the same thing for the admin info component. So what I'm going to do is that first of all, I'm going to grab my admin info list. Okay, so once we grab them, I'm going to create my type of admin info props, and here we're going to be using like for the admin, we're going to be providing like admin info list, like this one right here. We're going to be placing it here. Okay, now I'm going to also use my React. So I'll just use like React .fc for the functional component, and I'm going to provide my admin info list right here. It's going to also take the perimeter, or not a perimeter, but the prop of admin. So we have to take that, and we have to use that inside our component. So I'm going to remove them, and I'll use like h2 of admin information, like so, and provide a paragraph with the id of admin.id, and just duplicate that a few times to the name, and also email, and also the role, and finally we have to just replace that with, or you know what, yeah, we have to write like admin.last login, and from there we are going to be getting like two locale string. Okay, and I'm going to execute there. Instead of providing the ID, I'm going to just change that to a name, and I'm going to also provide the email here and also the role, and finally we are going to be getting the last login like so. I don't know why we are getting this error. Does not exist on what type. Let me just grab that and put this one right here. Now they're successfully gone, and this should be locale string. Now let me save my file and check this out. So here you can see we are now getting the user information, and we are also getting the admin information, and anytime I save my file, it's going to give us a different second right here, which is cool. But now we are no longer getting any errors, and we are now successfully providing our types for each of the component prop. Okay, so now let's talk about the reusable types. So to show you there, first of all, I'm going to be creating my components folder, and we would have like user info.tsx, and I'm going to also create yet another component which will be for the admin info.tsx, and I'm going to go into my app component. But first of all, we have to write our RAFCE inside this component and also inside this component as well. I'm going to go into my app component, and first of all I'm going to be importing my user info component and save there, and I'm going to also import my admin info component and save there as well. I'll just provide a bit of label right here like h1 and user info, and then I'm going to select this down hand, and I'm going to also copy there, and now let me just place it here, and let's just change this one to the admin info. So I'm going to save this file, and as you can see right here, first of all we have our user info component, and then we have our admin info component right here. So now I'm going to pass a bit of prop to it, so I'll just use like username, and username will be Alex. Let me just write a Alex right here, and we are going to be also specifying the email like alex@gmail.com, and I'm going to also provide the age, and age will be set to 20, and I'm going to also provide a location, and location will be, I don't know, Earth and also United States. I'm going to save this file, and now I'm going to copy every single thing from this component. Let me just place it right here to the admin component as well. So we are providing a name of Alex, we are also providing an email, age, and also the location. You know what, let me just change this location to something else like Mars or something, and unknown. And I'm going to also provide the admin property, and this will be a totally unique property. Like this component does not have the prop of admin, and this component has the prop of admin right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go into my user info component right here, and first of all I want to create my info, so I'll just write like type of info. You can create interface if you wanted to, so it's going to take like a username, and username will be a string. We're going to be also providing an email, and email will be a string as well. Let's just provide an age, and age will be a number, and provide a location, and location will be a string of array. So now we have to use that inside our user component. I'll first of all destructure my username, then email, and then age, and also the location, and we will annotate that with this info component, not a component but a type. Now if I save my file, it's going to say that we have to use all of these props inside our component. So to do that, I'm going to change this div to the UL, and now inside this UL we are going to be defining a few LIs like li for the username, and also let's just duplicate there a few times for the email and also for the age. And now I'm going to use my json.stringify so we can see the value of this location. So I'll just provide like location, and now I'm going to save my file, and I'm getting some sort of error, LOCATION, there we go. So now if I save my file, we are getting all of that data, which is looking amazing. I'm going to basically copy every single thing from this component. Now let me just place that inside this component right here. Save my file. Now we also have to destructure the username, email, and also the age. Copy there and place that right here. So now I'm going to copy this info. We're going to go into our admin component, and now let me just place that here, and instead I'm going to change that to a info, like for the admin component info. I'm going to copy that, and now let me place that, and as you can see right here we are not getting any errors. But if I go into my app.tsx component, here you can see we are getting this error like this admin is not defined. So if I go ahead and go to my admin component, and if I just use like provide a comma and provide my admin right here, save my file, now it's going to complain like, Hussein, you have to register there inside your a info type. So to do that, I'm going to use like admin and provide a string right here. So here you can see that error is now successfully gone. But did you notice one thing? We are now repeating ourselves. We are copying this type, and we are now placing there right here just because of this one admin. And why are we doing that? That's because this admin is unique to this component. We can totally use it right here. So if I just copy there, And now I can totally use my admin right here, save my file. That's totally done. And because of this admin prop, we are now copying the entire thing and we are now placing there right here. So if you don't want to use that, so for that we are going to be using the reusable component inside the TypeScript. So how are we going to be doing that? To do that, I'm going to go into my users info and I will just provide the export right here. So if I just provide this export, so which means like I can totally use this type anywhere I want, in any component I want. Okay, so now if I go ahead and go to my admin component, I can totally remove that. And now I can import my info right here. So if I hit enter right here, so it's going to import that from the user info. I'm going to copy that. And now let me just place it right here, save my file. Once again, we are getting an error for this admin. So to fix that, we have to define another type. So I'll just use like admin info list. And we are going to be using first of all the info, like all of the props which are already available inside this info. We also want to use all of them, and we are going to be providing an and now we have to define our new one. So we also want to use the admin, and admin will be a string. Okay, so if I copy that, and now let me just place it right here. Come on, let me just place it right here, save my file, and as you can see right here, those errors are now successfully gone. So this is how we are going to be defining the type for our prop in one component. We just have to export that. This is how we are going to be importing that. And now later, if we decide to add some more prop, so this is how we are going to be attaching that by using this AND operator. Okay, now the final thing I want to show you is that you can explicitly type up type right here, which means like we are now telling our TypeScript compiler like this is going to be some sort of a type. This is not a component, this is not some sort of a data available inside a other file. These are types. So now we are telling our compiler like these are types, so it's gonna treat it as a type. Okay, so yeah, that was the reusable component. And next we're going to be learning about the useStat types. Okay, so now let's talk about how we are going to be using our types for our useStat. So to do that, I'm going to create my components folder, and I'm going to define my counter.j, not JSX but TSX right here. Let's just use our RAFCE, save my file, and register that counter inside my app. So I'll just use like counter, and now let's just register there right here. So if I save my file, and as you can see, we are now getting our counter, which is looking amazing. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to define my count. So I'll just use like const count, and then set count will be equals to the useStat, and we are going to be providing the initial value of 0 to that. Okay, so it is not complaining, but if you want to provide a type for our useStat, this is how we are going to be doing that. So if I hover my mouse over to there, and as you can see right here, this is a generic function, which means like we can provide more types at once. And if you guys don't know what a generic function is or generics are, so you should definitely go ahead and watch my TypeScript course, and there I explain generics in a more great detail. So I'll just specify the type of number right here, and here you can see we can specify the number, we can specify the string, we can provide like undefined, we can provide null if you want, we can provide any kind of type. So I'm going to just specify like number, and this is how we're going to be defining a useStat inside our TypeScript component. Okay, so now we can totally use that. We can do like basically anything we want to do with this. So I'll just use like counter app, and inside there we are going to be creating our count as a paragraph, and I'm going to specify count as a value. Underneath that we are going to be creating our button, which will just say increment, and also we are going to be creating a component, and let me just duplicate that and change that to decrement, and let's just provide a bit of the on click on there when somebody clicks on there. So what do we have to do in that situation? We're going to be using our set count. In the first case, we're going to be incrementing our counter by 1, and in the second case we are going to be decrementing our counter by 1. So now if I save my file, and as you can see right here, I can increment my counter and I can also decrement my counter. So yeah, this is how we are going to be providing a type for our useStat. Welcome to the useStat challenge with React.js and TypeScript. So the first thing that you have to do is that you have to define a stat variable by using the useStat and type that explicitly. So I would recommend you to create a counter component by using the useStat and annotate that with a number. Okay, so if you can even do this one, you don't even have to do the first step, to be honest. Now for the second step, you have to create a user profile component, and then inside that profile component, you're going to be defining your stat by using the useStat, which will hold the object with the user information and type it accordingly. Okay, like basically you're going to be creating some sort of an object which will have like the username, age, and some sort of location or something like that. You can put like basically any kind of user information if you wanted to. Next, you have to create a to-do list.tsx, define a state variable for the to-do list item, and type that accordingly. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. And now let me just give you my solution. So I'm going to create a user profile. Oh, you know what? We're not going to do that, not right now. First of all, let me just show you the counter component. So I'll just create like const count and then set count. Come on, set count like so, and that's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be 0. And now if you want to annotate that with a number, so this is how we are going to be doing that. So we can also just write our h1, and here we are going to be defining our counter or count to be precise. And next we have to create our button which will allows us to increment our counter. So I'll write like on click, and when somebody clicks on there, we are going to be firing this function. So I'll just use like const increment function, and inside this function we are going to be using the set count. And let's just provide our previous previous count would be fine, and then previous count plus 1. So now if I save my file, and I'm going to use my npm run dev to run there, and here you can see we are now getting our counter. If I click on this, so it's going to just increment there by 1. So that was the easy part. Now we are going to be also creating our user component, and we are going to be typing there. So I'll use like user profile dot not JSX but TSX in this case. Let me just use my RAFCE inside there, go to the bottom, and here we are going to be rendering our user profile component like so, and this is how it will look like right here. So what I'm going to do is that first of all I'm going to define my state. So I'll just use like use state, and here we're going to be passing an object, and first of all I'm going to pass like a name. We're going to be also providing an age of 0, and the email will be set to empty string. Okay, so I'll just annotate there with the interface, or you can also create the type if you wanted to. So I'll just create an interface, and the interface name will be user profile, or user profile state or something. So I'll write a name which will be a string. I'll also write the age which will be a number, and also the email which will be a string. Okay, so I'm gonna copy this user profile. You know what, user profile state would be fine. So I'm gonna copy them, and now let me put there right here, or annotate there here like so. And what I want to do is that I want to create my profile, and also set profile, and it's going to be equals to this use state. Next we have to use there, so I'm going to remove this user profile, and I will just write like user profile inside the h2, and I'm going to also write the input field, and inside this input field the type will be set to text, and I'm going to also provide the placeholder of name to there, and the value will be set to profile dot name. And I'm going to also provide the on change event handler when somebody changes something or types something inside this input field. So we are going to be firing this function which will say like update name. This is the function which we are going to be creating in a few seconds, and it's going to take the event.target.value, and it's going to pass there for this function. And you know what, I'm going to just create this function right away. So yeah, I'll just do that right now. I'll use like const update name. It's going to take the name, and we will annotate there with a string. And inside there we are going to be using a set profile. It's going to take the previous profile, and here we just have to use like first of all we have to copy our previous profile. Come on, previous, previous, or prev profile to be precise, and we're going to be also providing a new value to there. Okay, so this is how we're going to be defining our update name. And let me just see. So if I just type something, but I cannot submit there, so that's why we cannot see there. Anyways, you will get there in a few seconds. I'm going to also define yet another input field. So I'll use like input with the type of number in this case. And here we're going to be providing the placeholder of age to them. I'm going to also provide the value. And for this value, we are going to be using like profile.age is greater than 0. If that's the case, we're going to be getting like profile.age. But if that's not the case, we're going to be setting there to empty string. And also when somebody change or types something inside there, we are going to be firing this update age function which we are going to be creating in a few seconds. And I'm going to paste like event.target.value inside there. And now underneath this input field, we are going to be defining yet another input field. So I'll use like input, and the type will be set to email. We are going to be also passing the value, and value will be coming from the profile.email. And when somebody types something inside there, we are going to be firing the event object and creating this update email function in a few seconds. And I'll use like event.target.value. Finally, we have to render our content. So I'll use like h3, and here we're going to be writing like profile summary, and underneath them we're going to be creating our paragraph. And first of all, let me just render my profile.name, and I'm going to duplicate there like 3 times. So we have a profile.age and also profile.email. Okay, so let's just change that to age and change this one to email. And yeah, I guess that's gonna be fine. But we also have to create this update age and also the update email. So I'm gonna just create that right here. Const update age. It's gonna take age as a parameter, and we will just annotate that as a string. Okay, so now inside there, we are going to be using like set profile, and here we have to provide our previous profile, and inside there we are going to be first of all cloning our previous previous profile, and then we have to just provide a new value to that. Okay, so we are going to be passing an age, and now we want that age to be a number, so we can convert this age to a number like so by using this number constructor, or we can just write a plus, so it's going to also convert that to a number. And now underneath them, we're going to be also defining our update email. So I'll use like update email, and it's going to take the email as a parameter, and there's going to be a string. So we also have to annotate them. And I'm going to use like set profile, and here we once again we have to provide our previous profile, and then we're going to be making a clone of there by using dot 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 previous profile. Come on, profile, and I'm going to also provide the new email to there. Okay, so that was a lot of talking. So let me just see. Here you can see we have our user profile. We don't have nothing for the name. For the age we have like only 0, and for the email we don't have anything. So if I just write like my own name, and it's gonna add there right here for this name. I can also change the age to like 22, and I can also provide the email like test@gmail.com. It's gonna add there right here. So this is going to be my profile summary. So that's done. Now it's time to create our to-do list application. So I'm going to go ahead and create my to-do .tsx or to-do to-do list.tsx would be fine. I don't know what the hell am I thinking of right now. So let's, oh my god. You know what? To do would be fine. So to do.tsx is fine, and I'm going to write my RAFC inside there, and I'm going to go ahead and go to my app and register there right here. So let's just write our to do and register there. And the first thing that I want to do is that I want to write like to do's, or yeah, to do's would be fine, and then set to do's, and that's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be just empty array. I'm going to also create an interface for that, because we're going to be creating our to-dos which will have an interface of to-do. I'm going to provide the ID, and ID will be a number. I'm going to also provide the task, and the task will be a string, and the completed will be set to boolean. And now let me get this to-do interface, and we have to annotate our state to there. So let's just write our to-do, and here we have to annotate that like so. And now let me go to the UI and change this UI. So I'll use like h2 to-do list, and underneath there we're going to be creating a button which will say like add to do like so. And for this button, when somebody clicks on there, we are going to be firing this function. So let's just use like add to do, and we're going to be providing god damn it add to do, and we're going to be providing a new to do inside there. Let me just create this function right away. So I'll just create that right here, and yeah, I guess that's gonna be fine. So let's just create that add to do, and it's gonna take a task as a parameter, and we will annotate that as a string. Okay, so inside there, first of all, we are going to be creating our new to do, and I'm going to also annotate that with this to do, and here that's going to be equals to this object. So it's going to take the ID, and ID will be coming from todos.length plus 1. So that's going to be just basically my ID, and we're going to be also providing a task which we are taking as a parameter, and we are going to be providing there for this function. And I'll also provide the completed, and that's going to be set to false. Just like I'm going to have to provide a commas instead of providing that whatever that was. Let's just provide a set to do's, and finally we have to provide a previous to do, or to do's will be fine. And here we have to just make a clone of previous to do's. So let's just write our prev to do's, and I'm going to add my new to do to there. Okay, so let's just hide this one. I'm going to put that at the top. We are going to be rendering our to do, so I'll use like ul, and I'm going to iterate over through all of the to-dos by using the map. And it's going to take a to-do as a parameter, and inside there we are going to be using our li to render over each to-do. So for each of the to-do, I'm going to write like to-do.task, and then I'm going to write like is it completed or not. So I'm going to use like to-do.completed, completed. God damn it. So just to do dot completed. If that's the case, completed. If that's the case, we're going to be just writing like completed. But if that's not the case, so we are going to be setting there to empty string. Okay, and I'll also provide a key. So I'll just write like to do dot id as a key. I'm gonna save this file, and finally let me go into my app.tsx, we already provided all of that. So let's just test this out. So here you can see we have our add to do. I'm gonna click on that, so it's gonna just add a new to do anytime I click on that. So yeah, that was our example about the use state, and we learned a lot about how we can annotate our use state. So that was it about for the count example, for the user profile example, and also the to-do list example as well. Now we are going to be covering 3 topics at once, like use ref, forms, and events, like how we are going to be providing up types for the use ref, forms, and also for the events. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create my components folder. Inside this component folder, we're going to be providing our form.tsx, and inside there I'm going to just use my rfc, save my file, and we also have to register there inside our app component. So I'll just use my form, and if I hit enter, so it's going to grab that from my components folder. So what I'm going to do is that first of all I'm going to define my state, which will be like submitted, and also set submitted data, and we're going to be storing that inside the use state. And for the initial value, I'm going to specify the name, and name will be set to empty string. We are going to be also providing an email, and email will be set to string, and we also have a password, and password will be also empty string. So now we can create a separate type for all of them. To do that, I'm going to be using a type, and I'm going to give it the name of like form data, and inside there we are going to be defining a name which will be a string. I'm going to also provide the email which will be a string, and also the password which will be also a string. Okay, so I'm going to copy this data right here, and now we have to annotate our use state with this data. I'm going to be using my form data, and now let's just annotate our use state with that data. So now that's totally done. Next, we are going to be also using the use ref. So I'll just use like const name, and we are going to be using a use ref for that. And if I hit enter, so it's going to auto import that from the React.js. We don't need the reducer, so let's say bye bye to that. And the initial value will be set to null. Okay, and I'm going to just duplicate that a few times. So I'm going to just change the variable name to like email, and also to the password as well. So now we have to specify a specific type for this use ref. So we are going to be using this use ref inside our form and inside our specific HTML input element. So we have to tell our use ref that we are going to be using this name, email, and password inside the HTML input element. Okay, so I'll just use like HTML input, and if I hit enter, and here you can see we are going to be using our type on the HTML input element. So I'm going to copy that from here. Let me just use that here and also here. Okay, so this is how we're going to be providing a type for the use ref. And now let's just use that inside our component. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove this div, and I'm going to change that with this form. I'll just remove this form from here, and now I'm going to provide my input field, and that input field will take the type of text. We're going to be also providing a placeholder which will say like enter your name, and also I'm going to be defining my ref. Come on, my ref, and it's going to be referencing to this name. Okay, so I can totally duplicate that a few times. I'm going to just change that to email, and also to the password as well. Okay, so I'll also change these to email, and also this one to password as well. So if I save my file, that's everything that we have to do for now. But I'm going to also create a button which will say submit. Okay, and we're going to be also providing a type for that, and the type will be set to submit. Now underneath there we want to show our data, so I'm going to just write a section, and now inside this section I'm going to write my h1 which will be set to name. And first of all we have to grab our submitted data, and we're going to be using the dot name property on there. Okay, so as you can see right here, so we have our submitted data, and we have the name, we also have the email, and also the password. If you want to see all of the data, so I'm going to just duplicate that like a few times. We have to change that to the email, and also change this one to the password as well, just like this. So I'll just change this one to the email, and I'm going to also change this one to the password. So if I save my file, and that's everything that we have to do for the UI. But now we are going to be attaching our event on the form. So when somebody submit that form, like when somebody fill that form and submit there, and if you want to provide our arrow function right here like this, we don't have to specify a type for that. But if you want to extract all of that logic into a separate function, so for that we have to specify some sort of a type for that. So I'll just use like handle submit, and I'm going to copy there, and let's just create our handle submit right here. Okay, so I'm going to be using like const handle submit. It's going to take the event, and as you can see right here, we are now getting this error. So to fix this error, we have to tell our TypeScript that we are using a form event, like we are using a event on the form right here. and we also have to tell it that we are going to be firing this function on the HTML form element like this one. Okay, so we also have to tell it there. I'm going to be using like HTML form element, and now if I hit enter, so this is how we are going to be telling our compiler that we are going to be firing this event on the form event, and then we are going to be using that on the HTML form element. Okay, so I can just use like event dot prevent default, so it's going to just prevent our default behavior. And now I can just grab like const name value, like whatever user type inside this input field right here, like the name input field. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just use like name, and I'm going to be getting a current property. That's because of this name right here, which is now set to this reference. And now if I just use the dot value, and what are we getting? We are now getting an error. If I hover my mouse over to there, it is now giving us like name dot current is possibly null. It is null, not possibly, because we already set that to null. So how can we fix this error? To fix this error, we can use the null insertion operator right here, which we already covered in my TypeScript course. If you guys don't know about this, so you can definitely watch my TypeScript course. But if you guys already know that, that's cool. So basically, we are now telling our compiler like, you don't have to worry about this code, like it can never be null and it can never be undefined. We are now telling this to our compiler like, you don't have to worry about our code. Okay, so now I'm going to just duplicate there like a few times, maybe 2 times more, and I'm going to change this variable name to like an email value, and I'm going to also change this one to the password value as well. Okay, so we can totally log that to the console, or we can just submit that to our DOM. So I'll just use like set submitted data, and we are going to be providing our object. Let's just provide a name, and for the name we are going to be providing like a name value, which is this variable right here. I'm going to also provide a comma, and let's just provide an email, and that's going to be the email value. And also for the password, we are going to be using the password value, or password value rather. So if I save my file, now we no longer have any errors right here, because we successfully types or we successfully provided a types for everything. And now here you can see we are now getting this UI. So anything I type inside there, like for instance, if I specify my name of Hussein, and my email will be test@gmail.com, and what is that? Password. Enter your email, and enter your password. There we go. So if I save that, now I can write like my real password, and now if I submit there, here you can see, oh, we are getting Hussein once again, and I'm providing a test and my real password. Why is that? Oh, that's because we are using a name again and again. We have to change that to the email, and also we have to change that to the password right here. So if I save my file now, and if I submit there, now we are getting a name as Hussein, email as a test@gmail.com, and password my real password right here. So if I just refresh there, and let me type something at gmail.com and something cool, and now let me click on this submit, and this is how we are going to be getting all of their data right here. Okay, so this is how we are going to be providing types for the prompt, for the form, and also for the event, and also for the useref. Create a file with the name of focus input.tsx inside the src directory, and define a component that user useref to focus on the input field when the button is clicked. Type the ref appropriately. So that's going to be the first part. In the second part, create a file with the name of contact form.tsx inside the src directory, and then define a form component with the type of stat and form handler. After that, create a file with the name of event handling.tsx inside the src directory, and define a component that demonstrates typing different event handlers. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. And now let me give you my solution. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define my focus input.tsx. I'm going to use my RAFC inside there. Go to my app. First of all, let's just save there and register my focus. Oh god damn it, FOCUS. Oh my god, FOCUS. If I can type it today. So focus input right here. And now if I check this out, so here you can see we are now getting our focus input, which is looking cool. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be using the useRef, which not a reducer, useRef, which will be coming from the React.js. and here we are going to be providing the initial value of null to them. I'll store in the variable with the name of like input ref, and that's going to be equals to this use ref, and we will also annotate them with the HTML input element which will be coming from the definition file. So if I hold control and click on there, and here you can see we can now get like all of that what do we call it, their types from the TypeScript. So yeah, that's the first thing. Now next we have to use this, so I'll just write like input field with the type of text, and I'm gonna also write the ref, and we will just reference that to the input ref. Let me define my placeholder which will say like click the button to focus me, like so. And finally we are going to be also providing a button, and when somebody clicks on their button, we're going to be firing a function which will be a handle focus. Handle focus will be fine, and focus input will be the label. Now let me create this handle focus right here underneath this input ref. So I'll just use like const handle focus, and that's going to be an arrow function. We're going to be getting our input ref dot current value, and we are going to be only using the focus inside there. So now let me save my file and check this out. So anytime I click on this input field, so it's going to focus my input field, and this is how we are going to be annotating this. So that was the first step. Now for the next step, we are going to be creating our contact form. So contact form .tsx, and here let's just use our RAFCE and register there right here. So we have our contact form and register there and save there. So what I'm going to do is that first of all I'm going to use my use state, and here we're going to be providing our object, and inside this object we will have our name, and also we would have our email like so, and we are going to be destructuring the form data and also set form data, and it's going to be equals to this use state. And now for this form data we are going to be annotating there with the interface. So now let me just create an interface for that. So we're not going to be doing anything crazy. You can either create a type if you wanted to, but in my case I'm going to create an interface with the name of like contact form stat, and basically you can give it like any name that you prefer. And I'm going to write a name and annotate there with the string, and email and annotate there, come on, email with the email and annotate there with the string as well. So I'm going to copy there, and I'm going to annotate my use state with this contact form state right here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just remove this div, and I'm going to replace that with the form, and I'm going to also replace this other one to the form as well. So let's just create our div. Inside this div we're going to be creating our label, remove this HTML4 from there, and I'm going to also provide my name inside there. First of all, we are going to be registering the input field, and this input field will have the type of text. Name will be set to name, and we're going to be also providing a value, and that value will be coming from the form data dot name. Okay, so we are going to be also providing the on change event handler, and when somebody types something inside there, so we're going to be firing this handle change event. Now let me duplicate this div right here for the email. So I just duplicated there and change there to email, and also change this text to email, and we're going to be also changing the name to the email as well. Okay, so change the name to the email, and in this case we're going to be still providing this handle change, and underneath this div we're going to be creating our button which will say like submit, and for this button we're going to be providing the type of submit to that. Okay, like so. And now finally we have to just create our handle change function inside this component. So I'll use like const handle change. It's going to take the event object, and we're going to be annotating there by using the change event. So let's just write our change event, and here for this change event we're going to be using there on the HTML input field. So we also have to explicitly specify that HTML input field as well. Okay, so from the event.target we're going to be destructuring the name and also the value. So now let me just destructure the name and also the value out of this event.target. Okay, so here we're going to be using like set form data, and let's just provide our previous state to there, and once again we are going to be making a clone of our previous state, and here we're going to be defining a name, and then we have to provide a newer value which we are now getting from this event.target right here. Okay, so now I'm going to save there, and that's going to be it for our handle change. Next we also have to define our on submit function. So whenever our form is submitted, so we're going to be firing our handle submit function. I'm going to copy there and create my handle submit right here, provide our event, and we will annotate there with the form event, and here we also have to tell it that we are going to be using there on the HTML form element, HTML form, and then element like so. Okay, so here we have to use our arrow function. We're going to be preventing the default behavior, and also underneath there we have to just log to the console or form data, and here we are going to be using some sort of a label like form submitted, like so. Okay, that was a lot of talking. And yeah, you know what, let me just test this out. So here you can see we have our name and email. For the name, I'm gonna specify my own name. For the email, I'll just write like test@gmail.com. And now if I click on this submit and open my console, so it's gonna give us all of their data right here, but we are getting some sort of error. I type Hussein and test@gmail.com and click on there. Now we are getting our form submitted and also our email and our name data. So which means like everything is working the way we expect him to work. And this is how we are going to be providing an annotation or TypeScript for our event object. And this is how we are going to be providing this is how we are going to be creating an interface for our state. Now let me create the final component, which will be for the event handling. So we are going to be using like event handling.tsx. I'm going to use my RAFC inside there, go to my app and register that component right here. So event handling, and I'm going to just call this component. Check this out, and we have our event handling, which is looking amazing. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to create my h2, which will say like event handling example. And now underneath there, I'll just create a button, and that button will say like click meh. And here we also have to provide the on click event handler, and when somebody clicks on the handle click, so in that situation we are going to be just firing this function like handle click, and we are going to be also creating an event for this one. So like when somebody mouse enter, so in that situation we are going to be firing this function like handle mouse enter. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define both of these functions. So first of all, let's just define this handle click one, then we're going to be defining this handle mouse enter. Okay, so I'm going to copy there and create my handle click. It's going to take the event object, and we're going to be annotating there with the mouse event, and we also have to explicitly tell it that we're going to be firing that event on the HTML button element like so. And here inside there we're going to be logging to the console like event.current, come on, current current target, and also we have to just provide some sort of a label like button clicked or something like that. I'm gonna save my file, and we are getting some sort of error. Oh, that's because we have to write a react dot. So I'm gonna use react and hit enter, so it's gonna grab this react from the react.js. That's the first thing. Now we also have to define this function. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define there right here. So const handle mouse enter. It's going to also take the event object, and we're going to be annotating there by using react.mouse and mouse event, and then we're going to be telling it that we're going to be firing there on the HTML dev element. Okay, so I'm going to also provide what do we call it, console.log, and here we're going to be using like e.current target right here, and I'm going to also provide some sort of a label which will say like mouse entered or something. Now let me save there and test this out, and here you can see we have our label, and we also have our button. Let me just refresh there, and whenever I hover my mouse over to there, so it's going to give us that mouse entered, and it's gonna also gives us, you know, let me just show you that it's gonna also gives us that specific div. So now inside this div we have our event handling example and also our button. And now if I hover my mouse over to this click me, it's gonna also gives us like mouse enter. It's gonna gives us that data. So yeah, that was example, or that was a challenge for the, let me just show you the focus input, contact form, and also the event handling. Now let's talk about how we are going to be using a TypeScript with context API. So to do that, I'm going to create a folder with the name of context, and now inside this folder I'll just create like my context.tsx. and now inside there, first of all, we're going to have to import our create context from React.js. And now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to create an instance of that. So I'll use my export and then const my context, and that's going to be equals to the create context. So we are going to be creating an instance of that. And now for the initial value, I'm going to provide a count, and count will be equal to 0. And we're going to be also creating an increment function which will just return nothing for now. And then we are going to be also creating one more function for the decrement. Okay, so I'm going to save this file. And now if you want to add a TypeScript for our context, so this is how we are going to be doing there. You can either create a type, or you can also create an interface if you wanted to. So I'll just create my interface right here, and I'm going to give it the name of like my context props. And now inside there we have a count which will be a number, and we also have an increment function, and from this increment function we are going to be only returning the void, like nothing for now. Then we are going to be also creating one for the decrement. So now let me just duplicate there and create our decrement function. And now if you want to add there, so I'll just write my less than sign, and then I'll write like my context prop, and I'm going to close there at this way. Okay, so this is how we are going to be defining our context. And now let's talk about how we are going to be creating our provider. So to create our provider, I'm going to just write like const my provider. Come on, my provider, there we go. It's going to take a children as a prop, and then inside there we are going to be using like const and then count and then set count. This is going to be the state which you want to pass into our component. So we are going to be using like use state, and the initial value will be set to 0. So it is now taking a children, so we have to provide a type for that as well. So I'll just use like my fc, like my functional component, which will be coming from the React.js, and then we have to provide our prop right here. So this is how we're going to be creating there. I'll use my interface and then my provider. Yeah, that's going to be fine. We're going to be providing a children, that's going to be coming from the React node, and if I hit enter, so it's going to auto import there right here. Okay, so now I'm going to take there and I'm going to put there right here, save my file, and now it's going to give us an error because we have to use it. Now first of all, let me just export this so that we can use it in other files. So I'll use like export default and then my provider. Come on, my provider, like so. Save my file, and now inside this my provider, I'm going to just return first of all my context. And come on, what the hell am I doing? And then I'm going to use the provider method on there. Okay, so I'll just close there. Inside this provider, I'm going to have to pass some sort of a data, so I'll use like value, and for the value we are going to be passing a count which we've already defined right here. And now let me just use my increment and decrement function. So I'll use like increment, and now inside this increment we're not going to be doing anything crazy, but I will just use like set count and then count plus 1, and I'm going to also create one more function for the decrement as well. So I'll use like decrement right here, and I'm going to decrement my value right here. I'll just write a minus, and I'm going to also copy both of them and place there right here along with the count. So I'll just place the increment, and I'm going to also copy the decrement, and I'm going to place there. Okay, so if I save my file, and here you can see all of the errors are now gone, and obviously we have to use these children inside our JSX. So I'll just put it there right here like so. So if I save my file, and this is how we are going to be providing a type for our context. Now I'm going to go into my main component, and we have to use that right here. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to grab my provider right here. I'm going to copy that from there, and let's just use that on all of the entire app. Okay, so I'm going to put that here, save my file, and this is how we are going to be successfully adding there. But now I'll just create a counter component. I'll write like component, and then counter.tsx would be fine. I'm going to use my rafce, save my file, go into my app component, and let's just register that counter right here so that we can see what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to just register my counter component right here, and now we have to use our context inside this counter component. So to do that, first of all, we are going to be importing the use context from the React.js, and then we are going to be also importing our own context, like my context, okay, from the context folder. And now to use that, the first thing that I want to do is that I want to write my fc. So I'll just use like fc for the functional component, and I guess that's going to be fine. And inside there, I will use my use context. I'm going to provide my own context to there, like my context, and we are going to be destructuring a lot of things from it. So like I need the count and also the increment function and also the decrement function from my context or my use context. So now inside there, let's just use the inside our component. I'm going to remove this div from here and provide my paragraph and provide the count, and the initial value for this count will be set to that count which is coming from our context. We're going to be also creating a button which will say like increment, come on, increment, and also let's just create one for the decrement and attach event handler on both of these buttons. The first one will take the increment and the second will take the decrement. So now if I save my file, and here you can see we are now getting our count. If I click on this, so it's going to increment my counter, and if I click on this one, so it's going to decrement my counter right here by 1. So yeah, this is how we are going to be providing a TypeScript for our context. Now let's talk about how we are going to be providing a type for our use reducer. So I'll just create a components folder, and inside there we're going to be creating our counter.tsx, and I'm going to use my rafce so that I can see something on the screen. And here we're going to be registering our counter component. So if I save my file and check this out, so here you can see we are now getting our counter, which is looking amazing. Now inside this counter component, the first thing that I want to do is that I want to import the use reducer from the React.js, and then we have to use the inside our counter component. So I'll use like use reducer. It's going to take the reducer function and also the initial state. So we are going to be providing like count, and count will be set to 0. Okay, so we are going to be destructuring our state and dispatch functions. So I'll just use like state and also the dispatch. And now that we have to create our reducer, and also we have to provide a type for this state. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just create my reducer function right here. I'll just give it the name of like reducer. It's going to take the state and also the action. And now in this function, we are going to be using our switch and cases one more time. And first of all, we are going to be providing if the action dot type, come on, let me just write a type, is set to increment. increment, there we go. So in this situation, we are going to be only returning the count, and count is going to be coming from the state.count plus 1. And if that's not the case, and the case is decrement, so in this situation, what do we have to do? We have to once again return our count, and count will be coming from the state.count minus 1. Okay, and also if that's not the case, so for the default value, we are going to be providing our state right here. I'm going to remove that, and here you can see we are now getting an error like what is a state and what is a action. So to do that, we are going to have to provide a type for that. So now I'm going to just create a type right here with the name of action or actions. I guess action would be fine because we are going to be doing only one action, and I'm going to provide the property of type to that, and that type can be either increment or that type can be, come on, let me just write, type can be set to decrement, as we've already specified there right here, like either increment or decrement. So now that we have to use that right here for this action, so I'm going to just annotate there with this action. The next thing that we have to do is that we have to take care of this state. So we are going to be also creating a type for the state as well. So I'll use like type, and then let's just use a state. And now inside there, we are going to be specifying a count, and count is now set to number. And we have to take this state, we have to provide there right here, and we are going to be also returning a count property from there, so we can also annotate this entire function as a state. Okay, so this is what we have to do. First of all, we have to create an action type, and we have to specify there for the actions. Then we have to create a state type, and we have to specify there for the state. Okay, so this is what we have to do for this reducer function. And now let's just use this state and also this dispatch function inside this UI. So to use them, I'm going to be using a paragraph, and I'll just provide a count, and that count will be coming from the state.count. And now underneath there, we are going to be creating a button which will just say like increment, and also we're going to be creating one for the decrement, decrement, there we go. I'm going to provide an on click event handler on both of them, which will just fire this dispatch function. Let's just fire this dispatch function, and we're going to be providing the type of increment for the first one and decrement for the second one. So let's just use our decrement, there we go. And now if I save my file, and everything should work the way we expect him to work. So if I click on this button, it will now increment our counter, and if I click on this button, it's going to decrement our counter. Okay, so yeah, this is how we are going to be providing a type for our use reducer. This is a lot of instructions. So basically, you're going to be creating a counter by using the use reducer, and you're going to be also providing the appropriate types to them. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution, and I'm going to give you my solution. So here, first of all, I'm going to just create like a folder with the name of reducers, and inside there, we're going to be defining our counter reducer.ts. And here we're going to be just defining our reducer. So I'll use like counter reducer, and it's going to take the state, and it's going to also take the action. And here inside there, we're going to be using our switch and cases, not like that, but switch and cases like so. So for the switch, we're going to be defining our action.type, type with the E. And for the first case, we're going to be providing an increment to there. Okay, so if that is set to increment, we are going to be returning the count, and count will be coming from the state.count plus 1. We're going to be only incrementing there. But if the case is set to decrement, so I'll use like decrement, decrement, decrement. So we're going to be returning the count, and let's just get there from the state.count, and let's just write a -1 because we are going to be decrementing there. After that, let's just remove there. After that, we are going to be also providing a default state to it. So for the default, we are going to be only returning our state. Now that's totally done, but we also have to provide a type for the state and also for the action, and we are going to be doing that totally separately. I'll write a type with the name of counter state, and here we're going to be only writing like count, and count will be set to a number. We can also make that as a one-liner. We don't have to split that in multiple lines. We can also write a type for the increment action, which will also take the type, and the type will be set to increment. So let me just write an increment, or you know what, let me just copy that from here, in a lot of time I misspell things. So now let me just duplicate there, and I'm going to change that to the decrement. So I'm going to copy and paste there, and also instead of writing an increment counter, I'm going to change that to dec, come on, decrement, decrement action. Now let me make that as a one type. So I'll use like type and make that as a counter action, and that's going to be equals to the increment action or the decrement action, like so. And finally, I'm going to also export this so that we can use that in other file too. I'm going to also export this counter, so I'll just use like export right here. And finally, we're going to be also exporting the first one. So now let me just use export for this one as well. Now it's time to annotate our state with our counter state and also our action with our counter action, like so. So now that's totally done. Now let me go ahead and create my counter.jsx or tsx component. I'll use like counter.tsx inside there. I'm going to use my RAFCE, semi-file, go to my app and register that component right here inside my app. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to grab my use reducer. So I'll use like use reducer from the React.js. You would also need to grab our counter reducer and also the counter state. From where? From our counter reducer. So now underneath that we have to define our initial state. For the initial ITIAL initial state, we are going to be annotating there with the counter state. That counter state is coming from this use reducer which we've already defined. Like count is now set to number. That's going to be equals to the count, and count will be equals to 0. That's totally done. Now we have to use our use reducer to get our dispatch function and also our initial state. So I'll use like use reducer, and here we're going to be passing our counter reducer and then the initial state inside there. Let me destructure my state and also the dispatch out of that use reducer. And now I'm going to create the UI for that, like not a magical UI, but a very simple UI like count. And here we are going to be only using our state.count to see our counter. We're going to be also creating a button. The first one will just increment our counter, and the second one will be decrementing our counter. So I'm going to provide the on-click event handler on both of them. So the first one will increment our count, not interface, but increment, INCREMENT, and the second one will be decrementing our counter. Okay, so now let me just go ahead and create the increment and also the decrement counters. Increment, and there's going to be an arrow function, and this arrow function will just dispatch, and here we have to specify that Now the final thing that we are going to be learning in this section is that how we are going to be providing a type for the use effect. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to first of all create my components folder, and I'll just give it the name of like my component.tsx inside there. Let's just use our RAFCE, save my file, go to my app and use that my component right here. I'm going to call this save my file and check this out. So here you can see we have our my component, which is looking amazing. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to grab our use state, because we would need some sort of a state to store our data, and we would also need the use effect as well. Okay, so now we are going to be using that inside our component. So this is how we are going to be doing that. First of all, we are going to be creating our data and then set data, and that's going to be equals to the use state, and we are going to be providing the initial value of null to it. I will also annotate that as a null value. Now that we have to fetch our data, so to fetch our data, you already know how we are going to be fetching our data. So we are going to be using the use effect right here, and now inside there we are going to be passing the callback function and also our empty dependency array. Now the first thing that I want to do is that I want to use my fetch data function, and that's going to be coming from this asynchronous function like so, and inside there we're going to be using our try and catch block. And if we have some sort of an error, so in that situation we are going to be using like console.error, and let's just use like error fetching data. Okay, and we will also specify our error right here. And if that's not the case, so for the try block, we are going to be getting our data by using the fetch method, and we are going to be getting our data from this API, which is jsonplaceholder.com and /product, and we are going to be getting only the first product. Okay, so we have to also change the or convert our response to JSON, and we have to store then some sort of a variable like so. And I'm gonna also set the data to, like set the result to our set data. So this is how we are going to be fetching our data. And now let's just execute this function so that we can successfully fetch this data. So if I save my file, and now if I click on this, it's gonna show us all of their stuff right here. Like it's gonna give us the ID, the title, and also the description. And we have a few more things like discount percentage and so on and so forth. So for all of their data, we are going to be creating a product type. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to be using, like, first of all, we have to go ahead and create our type right here. So I'm not going to waste a lot of your time, but we will just create this type right here. So first of all, we have a product type. It's going to have the ID, title, description, price, discount percentage, rating, stock, brand, category, thumbnail, and images. Okay, so these are all of the data that we are going to be using inside our app. So that's why we now successfully created a type for that. So we can now annotate our stat by using their type. So I'll just put a type or null. And now that's done, the next thing that I want to do is that I wanted to render all of their data right here inside my UI. So to render that, first of all, we are going to be checking like if you already have the data or not. So if we have the data, in this situation, we are going to be rendering our data. But if we don't have the data, we are going to be using a paragraph. Come on, let's just use our paragraph. And inside this paragraph, you will say like loading dot dot dot. Okay, and I'm going to also close my paragraph right here. Okay, so if we have the data, so in that situation, what do I have to do? I'm going to create yet another div, and now inside this div we're going to be rendering all of our content. So I'll just use like paragraph, and this paragraph will have the ID, and we will use like data.id. Basically you can also render your data or destructure your data right here if you wanted to, but I'm not going to. I'm going to fast forward the video because this is just a UI stuff and we can totally do that a bit quickly. So I'll just use like data.title. Now if I save my file and check this out, so here you can see we have our ID, we have the title, price, the discount, and so on and so forth. And we also have our thumbnail right here, so which I can copy and place there here. It's going to give us the thumbnail of our product. So if you want to go into like another product, so we can just choose like second one, save our file and refresh this. So now it's going to give us the updated data. I can totally copy that. I can totally render there if I wanted to, but you know what, I guess that's going to look better. So yeah, this is how we are going to be providing a type, or this is how we are going to be creating a type for our use effect. So now we are going to be using a Tailwind CSS inside our React.js project. So if you guys don't know what a Tailwind CSS is, I have a complete course on there which is about like almost 4 hours of content. Plus you are going to be also building 3 amazing responsive projects. So if you care about learning Tailwind CSS, I promise this is going to be the best course for you. So now let's get into it, like how we are going to be using Tailwind CSS inside our React.js project. So to do that, first of all, I'm going to just click on this getting started button. Then I'm going to go into the framework guides. Now we are going to be choosing Vite, and if you want to choose some other framework, you're more than welcome to use that. I'm going to just choose Vite right here. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to create our Vite project. So I'm going to copy that from here, and now I'm going to open my terminal right here. I'll just right click on that, so it's going to paste my command right here. First of all, we are going to be using like npx create Vite project, and I'm going to just give it the name of like my project, and we're going to be using the React.js template. So now you want to go into their project by using a cd command. Now I'm inside their project. I'm going to use like npmi. Let's just use npmi. So it's going to install all of their packages by which your React.js is depends on right here. While it's doing its thing, I'm going to also copy there. So it's going to install a few things like Tailwind CSS, Post CSS, and also Auto Prefixer. It's going to also initialize our Tailwind CSS inside our project. Okay, so now that's successfully done. I'm going to just copy there once again. And now let me place it right here. And finally, we have to initialize our Tailwind CSS inside their project by just using npx Tailwind CSS init-p. So I'm going to just hit enter. So it's going to initialize my Tailwind CSS right here. And I'm going to open that by using my VS Code. So now inside there, we have to go into our Tailwind config.js file. So I'll just copy that and place it right here. So now we are inside this Tailwind config.js file. So we have to replace this content with this one right here. Okay, so we only want to provide our index.html file, which is inside the src file, and we want to select like all of these extension right here. Okay, so we just have to replace them, and also we have to go into our index.css file. I'm gonna copy that from here, and now let me just go into my index.css file. I'm gonna select every single thing and replace that with these three directives right here. Now finally I'm gonna copy this h1, and I'm gonna go into my app, not app.css but app.jsx, and I'm going to remove every single thing from there. I'll just use my rafce and replace their div with this h1. So I'm going to save my file. Now let me use my npm run dev to start my server. So here you can see we're now getting the styling. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go into the components, then I'm going to go to the browse component, and now I'm going to just choose this component right here. Okay, so we can totally copy the HTML code. I'm going to just select a few things, like maybe I'm going to just select this div right here and copy there, because I just want to test my code. So I'll just remove that from here and place these divs right here, save my file, check this out, refresh there, and we're not getting anything. Oh, that's because we are using a class instead of class name. So we have to select all of that and change that to the class name instead. So if I save my file and now refresh there, and it has the class of hidden, so I'm going to just remove that, save my file, and here you can see we are now getting these kind of a component. They are not looking that great, but yeah, trust me, you can do a lot of crazy stuff with Tailwind CSS, and I have a complete course on there, and if you want to check that out, here it is. Okay, so yeah, this is how we are going to be using a Tailwind CSS inside our projects. Okay, so time for another challenge, and I guess that's going to be the final challenge for our React.js and TypeScript series. So what you have to do is that you have to fetch your data from this JSON placeholder.type code, and this endpoint will give you a lot of users. So it's going to give you the user data structure like this. You're going to have the ID, and ID will be a number, then we will have a name, name will be a string, username will be a string, email will be a string, and phone will be also a string. So use the use effect to fetch the data, use the use state to store that data, and then finally just render it in some sort of a table or something like that. So give it your best shot. If you can do it, that's completely okay. Then come back and watch the solution. And here is my solution. So I'm going to just create my, what the hell, user list.tsx, and I'm going to use my rafce, save my file, go to my app, and render there right here like user list, like so. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is that I want to create a few states. So we are going to be creating a state for the users, like so, and also the set users, and it's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to empty array. Okay, so let's just create an interface for this array. I'm going to place this interface right here. So we have our user, and we have the ID which will be set to number, and the rest of the stuff will be set to string. So we are going to be annotating our state by using this user, and we have to provide our array inside there, like so, and we have to close there. Now underneath there, we have to use our loading, and then set loading, and it's going to be equals to the use state, and the initial value will be set to true. And we also have to annotate that as a boolean, because we are storing the value of boolean inside there. Now finally, we also have to create one for the error, and that's going to be set to the set error, and we have to use our use state one more time, and the initial value will be set to null. Okay, so I'll annotate that like it's going to be either a string or null. Okay, and we have to close this. So that's going to be it for our state. Now we have to fetch our data by using the use effect. So I'm going to be using like use effect, and here we have to specify our callback function. And for this callback function, we're going to be providing our empty dependency array, and we're going to be also creating a function which will allow us to fetch the users, like so, and that's going to be an asynchronous function. And inside this function, we're going to be using our try and catch blocks. For the catch, we'll be using like set error, and we have to provide our error an instance of, come on, that error will be the instance of error. If that's the case, we're going to be getting like error.message out of there. But if that's not the case, we're going to be just saying like an error occurred, like so. We're going to be also providing the finally state, finally, and for the finally, we're going to be setting the loading to false. Okay, and now let me take care of the try block. So for the try block, first of all, we're going to be fetching our data by using the fetch API, and I'm going to specify this URL inside there, and let me just store it in some sort of a variable like response like so. And I'm going to also check if we don't have the response, if the response is not okay. So in that situation, we are going to be throwing a new error which will say like network response was not okay. And if that's not the case, we're going to be getting our data. So I'll use like const data, and we're going to be annotating there by using our user like so. And it's going to be coming from the await and then response.json, and we have to convert our data to the JSON response. We also have to push our data to our users. So we're going to be using like set users, and let's just push our data inside there. So now that's totally done. So I'm going to hide, or you know what, we also have to call this function inside there like so. And now we have to hide this use effect. Now I'm going to be checking. So if loading, so in this situation we're going to be returning or loaded. So I'll just write like div, or I can also write h1, which will say like loading dot dot dot. And we can also duplicate there and change that to the error. So I'll just change that to the error like so. So I'm going to also render my error inside there. And here we have to just write an error. So if you have some sort of an error, we're going to be displaying there. Now for the UI, I'm going to remove this user list from here, and I'm going to have to change that to a table, and also change this div to the table. And inside this table, we are going to be defining our t head. Okay, and inside this t head, we have to define our tr. Inside this tr, we are going to be defining our th with the name. Let me just duplicate that a few times. We also have to write a username, and we also have to write the email. And finally, we have to write the phone. Come on, phone like so. And underneath this t head, we have to write our t body. And inside this t body, we are going to be iterating over through all of the users by using this map. It's going to take the user as a parameter. And here we have to specify our tr. And for this tr, we are going to be also providing a key, which will be a user.id. And here we also have to use our td to render our elements. So I'll use like user.name. And also I'm going to just duplicate that a few times, change that to the name. Yeah, you know what, that was the user ID, and this is going to be the name. And we also have to change that to the username, and change this one to the email, and finally change this one to the phone. Now let me save my file and check this out. So here you can see we are now getting the name. It shouldn't be the name. We also have to provide the ID. So let's just duplicate that, change that to ID. Now we are getting